I tried to buy rental properties and rent them out as a way of getting rich, but I didn't really start making progress until I switched to what I do now instead. And given that my real estate business does over $100,000 a month, I think it was the right decision. Let me show you what I did differently. What I'm going to explain to you guys today is something that you may have never heard in the real estate space before, and I'll show you exactly why. And it's not theory. These are actual 3 rental properties that I bought, but here's the concept that everybody misses when it comes to real estate. And that's that when you see rental properties, when you see people on here on YouTube and things like that talking about rentals, they tell you, oh, just go buy rentals and build wealth. But what they don't talk about is how are they buying these rentals and how are they making actual money? Because you want to know the reality in 2025, when I'm making this video, the reality is that the average rental property has negative cash flow on every single property. That means that when you factor in things like expenses, vacancies, utilities, all of these different things that come in the real estate space, you are losing money every month. Again, is this theory? No. I can show you my 3 properties where that is true. Now, are there creative strategies to make money on real estate? Yes, that always come with more risk, but the point is, how are people making so much money if their properties are losing money? And here's your answer. What you need, what you're being sold for these real estate properties is this fake idea of passive income, right? Now, in this case, it's actually passive losses, so welcome to the real world, but passive income isn't a real thing. It always requires effort, and especially when things are going downhill, it's the opposite. But again, how are people buying these properties? And it really comes down to this word right here. Active. It's all about active income. And if you look at the gurus that you see online, if you look at the people that are saying, oh, I'm buying 10 properties, 20 properties, I'm building a real estate empire, right? If you look at those people and you really dig in, what are you going to find? Well, you're going to find that those people are making active income through what? Courses, sales, or even normal people at their job. And then they're taking this money and they're funneling it into these properties to get things like tax benefits. And that's how they're actually making their money. These properties are losing cash every month. But even on my 3 properties that we own right now that we're losing cash on every month, we are getting some tax benefits and we are able to provide and pay for those things because of what I'm going to talk to you guys about today. But let's start at the beginning. How did I end up with these 3 rental properties? Well, if you go back 2 years, I knew zero about real estate. I knew nobody in the real estate space. Nobody in my family owned real estate. We were barely even in the investing game. So I was at square zero. If anybody thinks like, oh, you got to have the inside, your parents got to be an agent or whatever. None of that matters. This is 100% education. And that's where I started 2 years ago when I was getting started. Actually, almost 3 years ago now as we speak. And what I did to get started was what I would still say is the simplest path to owning a rental property in real estate, even in 2025, when those things are negative cash flowing. And what we did was we got our house right here. You get to see my beautiful art today. We did what's called a house hack. And what we did, quite literally, was divided the house that I bought, our first ever primary home, right, that my wife and I were living in, and we divided that into over here, our house, and then over here, an Airbnb. So we split it into 2. Now, was that easy to do? No. It took many months. We did all of the work ourselves, splitting it all up and all of that good stuff. So a lot went into it. And you might even be backing up even more and saying, well, Ryan, how did you afford to buy a house? Can't afford to buy a house in this day and age. Guys, stop playing the victim. It is not nearly as hard as people make it out to be if that is one of your goals, right? So when I bought this house, we bought it for $360,000 and it was a 5% down payment. So what does that come down to? The down payment was 18 grand. Now, before owning this house, I saved up the money to buy that by living inside of a van with no rent for a year while I was out in Montana working odd jobs to make money. So is this possible? Yes, absolutely. Now, does that come from nowhere? No, definitely not. And that's why a lot of people probably shouldn't own homes, but it is 100% possible to do. So that's what we did in order to purchase this property. And then when we got the house, we were paying about $2,900 a month for the house. Now, once we got this Airbnb finished, it took 6 months to get it up and running. Again, had never had a rental property, but this was a soft jump into it because since we were house hacking, we were paying $2,900 a month for our house either way. So any income that comes in is additional. And if somebody doesn't rent the Airbnb, then it's just like we're paying the regular mortgage that we plan to pay anyway. Now, what ended up happening is that if this was our mortgage, the Airbnb ended up bringing in about $2,000 a month from the property. Really cool. So now we're paying a net total of $900 a month to live in the house. Now, is that cash flow? Yes and no, right? Because we were planning on paying this. Now we technically only have to pay that. But is it actually making money? Well, no, it's really just supplementing. And you can see the risk reversal there compared to regular real estate is that stuff really decreases and doesn't become as much of an issue. And it all just becomes positive if it comes in. So we house hacked that property. Big win for us getting started. Then what do we do next? Well, we're like, we got to keep buying more real estate, right? Everybody says real estate is the way to make money. It's the way to quit your job. It's the way to build wealth. And so I went out and over the next year, and no, this did not happen overnight. But over the next year, I joined mentorships, spoke with a bunch of people, and ended up buying rental number 1 and rental number 2. Both of these properties were in Phoenix, which is interesting because the original property that we bought and lived in was in Jacksonville, Florida, but I was involved with a lot of people that were in real estate in Phoenix, and I had a lot of connections, I thought, to help me manage things. Didn't quite work out that way, but that's why we bought these 2 rental properties in Phoenix. Now, I want to give you guys these dates so that you can understand reality of real estate that nobody talks about. We bought this first one in March of 2024, and then we bought this second one in June. It was June of 2024, okay? March and June. Now, when do you think we got our first tenant inside of this property, our first ever rental property? We're all excited. We own rentals. We're building wealth. We're doing what the people on the podcast said. Yeah, we didn't get our first check until June of 2024. That means March, April, and May, we were just paying for expenses, paying for the house, which was 3 months of expenses. Oh, and did I mention the air conditioning unit went out that summer? That was $15,000 to replace that. So before we ever got a single payment into this first rental property, we were $40,000 in the negative. $40,000. Now, on average, what people say, and I don't even know how accurate this is anymore, but statistically speaking, the average amount of money that a long-term rental makes now is $200 a month. Now, if that average remained true, it would mean that it would take like 20 years to pay back the money that we lost on this rental in the first 3 months in profit. That's how long that would take, okay? This is when I started to realize, wait a second, somebody's been lying to me about buying these rental properties. What am I doing wrong? Or is just nobody telling the truth about this stuff? So we move on to the second one. We buy this one in June, and this one had a more expensive payment. The payment on this one was only about $1,750 a month. The payment on this one was $4,000 a month. This one was a much bigger, nicer house. It had 2 units, so a lot going on there. More money a month. And so we get it all fixed up and rented out. And what do you know? This property is doing about negative $500 a month. And this property over here is still doing about negative $200 a month. So 2 rental properties bought, both of them negative monthly, and we were $40,000 in the hole on this rental. You might be starting to pick up a theme, or maybe you're thinking to yourself, this guy just sucks at real estate. But hear me out on this. The reason that this is true, and the reason why people still buy real estate, is because they take this active income, they funnel it over here, and they don't care if they're losing $200. They don't care if they're losing $500 because they're getting the tax benefits of the property. It's going to appreciate over time. That is all true. I'm not here to debunk that because, in fact, I still own these 2 properties. And the reason why we don't care, although, well, I guess I care, but the reason that we're still surviving, even though they're losing money every month, is because we make our money over here in the active space. That's what I'm here to talk to you about, is that mindset shift that I had where I said, wait a second, people aren't buying rental properties to quit their jobs. That's not how this works, especially not in 2025. It's just not happening. What's happening is that people are buying those with the forethought of 30 years from now, these will appreciate, gain value, and I will be able to do things to save money and obviously sell them if I want to or whatever and get a bunch of money down the line in the long term. But this, what you're seeing right here, that's not getting me out of my job anytime soon. Heck no. And I wanted to quit my job. This was when I still had my job 2 years ago. I was trying to figure out how to get out. I was an electrical engineer. I thought I was going to love it. Turns out I didn't. And so I was trying to get out and I said, okay, that ain't going to do it. In fact, things are getting worse. Right now, our expenses are starting to go up. And that's when I had the big shift that I want to talk to you guys about next. And that is, if I can find my eraser, that was the active income shift. Everybody is coming into real estate with this idea of let me buy rental properties. That's what I know I'm supposed to do. It seems like it's like the wise decision in the long run. But I can't do that and put myself in a worse position than I was when I started. So here's what I did. I started trying a bunch of different side hustles in real estate. I still like the real estate game. Like, I thought it was interesting. There's a lot of room for growth. Clearly it works in the long run. And also I had spent the last year and a half getting into the space. So I knew that there had to be something I could figure out. So what I did was I just started trying side hustles. So over here, I was trying stuff like wholesale. I was doing partnerships, trying to make money with other people. I was trying multifamily, which in theory, I thought you could make fees if you buy and sell multifamily or get to go in on that with people. I don't know. I was trying everything, okay? And then finally, I tried getting into lending. Now, when I mention lending, your first thought, which is 100% fair, is, well, in order to lend, you would need money. But I had started hearing rumblings from people that they were doing certain types of lending where they were using other people's money. And yes, that does sound risky in theory, but also, if you really dig deep, most lending uses other people's money in some capacity. So is it that it's difficult, or is it just that you have to learn how to do it? Well, that's what I was out to figure out, because as I was trying all of these different side hustles and trying to figure out, okay, what's going to create the active income that will allow me to quit my job, allow me to buy rentals like this, and allow me to grow a business, I had to ask the question, what makes the most sense for me? A lot of people miss that, right? You want to go look at, hey, this is what this person online is doing. I'm just going to copy exactly what they're doing. And you don't ask yourself the question, do you actually want the life that they have? Think about that. Do you want the life that the person that you're looking after has? Because a lot of the time, we idolize these people that work 18-hour days, right? And they're grinding and they're never going to stop. And they're like, I'm going to take over the world. And if you want to do that, then you should follow their path. But if you don't, well, you can learn from them, but you may not want to copy everything that they're doing because it's probably not the path that you want to be on, right? That's where I made some mistakes, but we'll talk about that, because the first thing that I really got into that had success was wholesale. And what this was instead of buying rental properties for myself, which, by the way, everyone's like, don't wholesale, you got to keep the property. That's how you build wealth. Yeah, well, when you're losing money every month, you got to make money somehow, okay? So wholesale was me grabbing a property for $200,000 and then selling that property for, let's say, $210,000, right? And I would make plus $10,000 on that sale, okay? Cool in theory. And that's why I started doing it, because again, I was actually looking at the people I wanted to be like, and there was people my age, they were making paychecks like this multiple times a month. And at the time as an engineer, I was making $5,000, $6,000 a month, something like that. And so I'm thinking, all right, if I can find one of these bad boys a month, then I'm already almost doubling my income. Pretty sick, right? And so I got into wholesaling. And, if people haven't told you, it's a grind. You're just basically cold calling people, bugging them. People are yelling you, all of that good stuff, which, by the way, I'm not opposed to, because that actually does help you grow and learn and all of that good stuff. And so I was cool with that. But what I wasn't cool with is what I call the wholesale hamster wheel. And this is what it looks like. So let's say you find a property right here, and you take that property and you go find a buyer, and then you make your 10K. And this is the hamster wheel. And if you go around this circle, what you'll find is that this only can happen one time. Why? Well, it's kind of obvious when you think about it. The house down at the end of your street that's all beaten down, well, if you can get that property under contract and go sell it to somebody, then you can make your money on the property. But once it's sold, the property's obviously gone, right? And so what was happening was I build up all, spend months cold calling. Took me over a year. I finally got my first deal in wholesale, which is a funny story because I ended up making like $1,000 on it and almost getting sued. So real estate, entrepreneurship, woo. But anyways, what I found is that after all of that work, when that deal closed, I had to go back and find another property because the wholesale hamster wheel just restarts every time. It restarts every time. You go out and you do all this work, and then the second it's over, you feel good for like 2 seconds, and then you're like, but now I got to go find another one or I'm not going to get paid next month, right? And so over a few months of doing this, I started to get more burnt out than I've ever been in my life. There might be some people watching this that knew me in that period a couple of years ago. It was rough. I even have some clips of me talking about how it contributes to like 100% of the stress in my life and not very much joy. And I was in a bad spot, okay?
What I will say, and I think you can agree, like whether wholesale was 10% of my day or 100% of my day, it's pretty much 100% of my stress. Yeah. Like that's for sure.
So I was in the wholesale hamster wheel. I didn't know what that was at the time. Now I'm here to help you avoid that because as I was going through that, I said, okay, wholesale is also brutal. How can I find something that is active income, that helps me buy rental properties, that doesn't suck so much and has an easy entry because I was still new to real estate, still trying to figure things out. And that's when I found transactional funding. Kind of a long term. Let me break it down for you. Long-term lending is when somebody lends money for a property. And there's a really easy, I'm going to erase our rental properties over here now. There's a really easy way to break down what this looks like. So if you look at a real estate purchase, and by the way, if you're new to real estate, like this is just basic real estate. You don't have to think high tech, investing or whatever. But if you look at a real estate timeline like this, okay? And over here is when you go under contract on the property. And right here is where you purchase the property. Okay, I'm going to draw a dotted line down the middle right here. So we go under contracts on the property and then we purchase the property. When you purchase a property, there's all sorts of loans that you can get, right? You can get a mortgage. You could get a DSCR loan. That stands for debt service coverage ratio. That's like an investor loan. You can get an HML, which is what's called a hard money loan. That means it's a short term. It's like usually 6 to 12 months and it's for fixing and flipping. You could get what's called PML, which is a private money loan. There's all sorts of different loans. I could go on. And all of those loans fall under the category of asset backed. Now, this is really simple to think about by just looking at a mortgage, okay? When your parents went and bought a house, or when you went and bought a house and you got a mortgage on that house, if you stopped paying for the house, how does the bank get their money back? Well, they get it back by taking over the house, right? They take back your house, they can then sell your house, they can get their money back. So what is backing their money? What is protecting their money? Well, it's an asset, right? It's asset backed. This right here is lending. You are being protected by an asset on the product that you are delivering. Lending and transactional funding are not the same thing. Here's the difference. If we go over here and we look at the transactional side of things, everything that happens over here is what's called escrow backed. Why? Well, because unlike all of these other lending types right here, transactional funding happens before the purchase of a property. This is the best possible definition. I wish somebody would have explained this to me on the difference between these two things. All of these require an asset. All of these are escrow backed, meaning they're protected by contracts, not by the house itself. It's completely different. So what are the three main types of transactional funding? The first one is funding EMD. We'll talk more about these after I write them all down. It's EMD, double close, and then the stack method. Now, all of these come with different requirements and different situations. So let's break them down at a high level, starting with what I started with. Let me get the eraser. Let's start with how I started out, which, by the way, if you're watching this video and you want to get into this stuff, I'll give you guys some resources, but I will also say that this is the easiest way to start out right here. EMD. Okay? Why? Because EMD, if you don't know, is put down on any property ever. It's what's called an earnest money deposit, and it's just a small deposit to hold a contract, basically to legalize a contract on a real estate purchase. It is used on every real estate purchase ever. You'll find it right at the top of the contract. And here's why you can fund EMD for people and get paid. There's a couple reasons. One is that the person is broke, okay? This is a bad reason. A lot of people get into stuff because of this. This is a bad one, okay? Don't do this. But people need to put down EMD to buy property. So let's say they're going to buy a rental property and they need $5,000. Well, if they don't have $5,000, they could come to you and say, hey, can you fund that $5,000 for me, okay? If they're broke, that usually means that they're desperate. There's a lot that goes into this. I'll give you guys some stories, but that's why I try to avoid that. But there's a lot of other reasons as well. One of the main ones is that they're scaling. This is a great reason. The other reason is that it's large EMD, and that's another good reason. So for example, your average person, let's say they've got $10, $20, $30, $50,000 in their bank account, but they need $250,000 for EMD. And that money is going to sit throughout this transaction, maybe for 30, 60 days. Well, they're probably not just going to be able to come up with that, or else they wouldn't be wholesaling in the first place, right? And so they may need you, if you are a transactional funder, to come up with that money. Now, how do you come up with the money? We'll talk about that in a second. But the second one right here is scaling, and that is how I got started. I want to walk you through this entire thing because this is what changed everything for me, and maybe it will for you too. So I was doing the wholesale thing, right? And I was miserable. And then I found one person, and they were doing 5 to 10 deals a month. Now, this person was wholesaling. I was wholesaling, hated it. This person was wholesaling, had their whole thing going, whatever. I don't know if they loved it or they were doing it because they had to. Doesn't matter. The point is they were wholesaling 5 to 10 deals a month, and they needed about $25,000 a month in EMD. Now you can work that out. That means that their EMDs were between like $2,500 to $5,000 each. And so what happened was I met this person at a meetup and I said, hey, I will fund this $25,000 in EMD for you every month on all of these deals if you pay me 20% of that amount at closing. Now, for people that want to do some quick maths here, that 20% equaled $5,000 a month. And as you might remember, at the time, I was making about $5,000 a month at my job. Yes, this was my jackpot moment. I found the thing that I wasn't doing any work. These people were out here doing 5 to 10 deals a month. I was just funding those deals. But because money runs the world, don't forget it, money runs the world. If you can provide capital and get paid for that, then you can quickly create active income to go move into all of these other things. Now, here's where things start to get crazy. So I start funding this EMD for them. This was early on. And as I was doing this, I was still wholesaling and hating it. And what happened was I was wholesaling, and wholesaling was taking up 90% of my time, right? And I was making $10K a month. And then I was funding. That funding was taking up 10% of my time, and I was making $5K a month. Now, you might think to yourself, well, looking at this, it's pretty obvious which one I should be spending my time on if this one is making me 100% miserable. But in the moment, it's a lot harder to see that stuff because in the wholesale business, I had a partner, I had multiple people that were working for me, and I spent a long time trying to get that thing up and running. And this, the transactional funding, I hate to say this word, but it was really easy once I got it going. I didn't do anything to make this $5K a month. These people would reach out, I would fund their deals, and then I would make $5,000 every month. That's legitimately what was happening. Now, in order to get that, there was a lot of things I had to do, right? I had to learn everything that I've been talking about on this board. I had to get my confidence. I had to get my contracts in place, right? I had to do a lot of things, but once it was going, this was just happening. I wasn't doing squat. And so in my mind, I was like, well, cool. I'll just keep making that money and then I'll grow the wholesale business because at the time I didn't really know how to grow a funding business. I didn't have any idea what that might look like. And so this was where I was at. This was my crossroads. I was spending a bunch of time on the thing I hated, no time on the thing that was not only enjoyable, but was actually quite profitable. And that's where I had to have a turning point, which eventually happened in January of 2024. I stopped wholesaling. And at that point in time, or over the next month or so, as I kind of worked through things, I stopped wholesaling and I went full time into funding these transactional deals. And keep in mind, the EMD is just where I started, and then things grew from there. And if you looked at the timeline, right, when I quit here, by a few months later, probably by about May of 2024, I was doing $25,000+ a month. This was about a year ago as of the time of this recording. And then by May of 2025, I was doing $100,000+ a month with the same business. Why? Because I focused on the thing that scaled, and I found something that I didn't have to restart every month, right? Every month, the deals cycle. The same people that I worked with last month come back. And that's why this job, if you want to call it that, but this idea can function and grow so quickly because it just recurs. It just keeps coming in and making all that sense. So that was how I got into transactional funding and how I ended up here today. Now, what does it look like on a day-to-day basis to run this business? Well, here's the sequence. Let's get rid of this. Here's the sequence that is followed for transactional funding. Number one, you have to learn lead generation, okay? Biggest problem I see people make when they watch my videos and they want to get into this stuff is they're like, oh, cool, I'm going to go tell people I do this and I'm going to make this cool website and I'm going to feel legit about myself. But they don't actually go learn how to get leads. Guys, the people that you respect the most did not spend all of their time looking cool to grow their businesses. They spent all of their time in the trenches growing their business hardcore by doing what's called the rule of 100. This is one of my favorite strategies to follow because the rule of 100 means that every day I spend either 100 minutes creating content, right? 100 minutes building my business, or send out 100 outreach messages to people that may be somebody I can work with. Now, who do those people look like? Well, there's only two. There's this one and there's this one. Who are these people? This one is a wholesaler and this one is a buyer. These are the two people in real estate that need money, wholesalers and buyers. Now, some of them need lending, which I don't provide it, but some of them need funding, EMD, double close, and the stack method. Now, how do you take that and create high quality leads? Well, there's two types of people I told you about that you can focus on if you want to grow this business. This is what the day-to-day looks like for me. I find people like this that are doing one of two things, right? They're either scaling or they're making large purchases. For scaling, it's easy, right? Who's a wholesaler that's scaling? Well, it's probably the wholesaler that's posting deals every couple days, right? Another deal sold. We've got another deal available. Duh, they're the ones scaling. What about people that are doing large purchases? Well, what kind of large purchases are there out in the world? RV parks, mobile home parks, apartment buildings, commercial buildings. Larger price, larger EMD, we can fund it and we can make money. And if you use the rule of 100 to go find those people, then you will get your business started. I spent years just focused on that. And it was only recently that we moved from lead generation on to the rest of my day-to-day in the business. And really, even though I don't do as much physical manual outreach now, my lead generation looks more like making these videos, reaching out to people that I've already worked with in the past, referrals, all of that different stuff. But the actual flow of the deals on my day-to-day is, first of all, we have a funding request. Now, this is an incredibly important part because when somebody requests money from me, I need to be able to answer immediately whether or not it's something I can fund. If it's not a deal that I can fund, I need to let them know because guess what? They need the money. They wouldn't be asking for it if they didn't. So you need to be able to answer questions for people immediately. Is this something you can fund? Yes or no? Move on to the next thing. After that request comes in, that's when I'm doing that vetting, right, that I'm talking about, where we say, yes, this is something I can fund. Let me dive in, make sure everything checks out. Okay, cool. Then we get the contract signed, make sure that everything's in order. If you do not have contracts to do this, don't do it or work with somebody that does. I have made too many mistakes. I'll talk to you guys about the risks in just a minute with this stuff. So I get the contract signed. Then we're going to communicate, another C. Communication is the key to a happy life, right? You're going to communicate with everybody involved to try and get that deal to the finish line. Could take 5 days, could take 30 days, could take, I don't know, longer than that, right? But you're communicating all the way to the end, and then we're going to fund the deal, okay? That's the process on a day-to-day basis. Now, every day, I see about 10 to 20 requests. We have 10 to 20 requests that come in every day for people looking for funding in my business right now as I'm recording this video. Of those requests, we usually have about 3 to 4 that are accepted, okay? So what is that? On average, like maybe 20% are going through on these deals. And that's what the day-to-day looks like is we have these things coming in, we're reviewing them, we're vetting them. Hopefully we're accepting them because the more deals we accept and close, the more money we make. But there's a lot of factors that would go into that. And that leads me to your question, which is, okay, Ryan, what about the money? Now, this is a really easy one for me to break down for people, and I completely understand why this would be hard to grasp at the beginning, because when I was getting started, I had never raised capital in my life. I thought it was the scariest thing in the world, and I was like, you just gotta have money to lend, right? But here's what's interesting, right? If you look at somebody in the stock market, on average, I think a good average year is they'll make about 10% on their money, okay? If you look at somebody that does long-term lending, that could be for real estate or other private matters, they're gonna make around 12% a year on their money. If you look at somebody funding EMD, they're making on average 40% on their money, but wait, that's per deal. Per deal, they're making that money. So that means that if you have one deal a month, you would be making 480% yearly funding EMD versus these other things. Now, do you actually fund a deal a month with the exact same money every time? No, it's just an example. But the point is you make way more money funding transactional funding than doing these long-term deals. And what that means is that if you can prove that to people, then you can bring in capital that they will be happy to bring you money, because somebody that has, that's a doctor, right? Or maybe multiple people, family members, friends, whatever it might be. People in your real estate circle are like, wait, I have $100,000 that I've saved up. You're telling me that you could go fund $100,000 EMD and we could make $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 on that deal? Sign me the heck up. Again, this is not theory. This is how I built my business, by saying, hey, way higher returns over here. Just like that EMD example I gave at the beginning, those people come in, we say, hey, we'll make 20% off this every month. I'll pay you half. That's what I do. I pay the person who brings the money half. You can do it however you want. They come in and are like, holy crap, we're making so much money. And all I had to do is give Ryan my money. And if you can build up one of my favorite words, credibility, through your proof or through the people you work with or through your contracts and through your concepts, then you can bring that money in. But it's scary, right? When you're getting started, you're like, Ryan, I can't just go out and raise $100,000. That sounds like the craziest thing ever. You're probably right, although you can. I did it. But if you want to be more risk averse, then you just do what's called a JV or a joint venture. The scary thing about raising capital is that it all falls on your shoulders. But what if you just worked with somebody who already knew what they were doing? Like me, for example, right? I can run these deals. I've done hundreds of them. And if you came to me, I could provide capital and say, hey, look, I know how to run this thing. Let me show you how it's done so that you can do it on your own next time, but I'll help you out. And that way you can get your foot in the door without being like, you know what? It's just not going to work. I can't pull this thing off, because it's just not true, right? We're doing it every day. You should be too. Now, that's what a day-to-day looks like for me on funding these deals. We're just getting these requests coming in, reviewing those requests, and then there's just a whole lot of paperwork that goes on, right? I have 2 people that work on my team that help me. They help me vet the deals. They help me get the contract signed. They help me with the communication, everything that I just threw up there on the board for you. But when I was getting started, it was just me. And unless you have 15 or 20 deals coming in a day, you can do this on your own. Almost everybody I work with does this on their own. Because why? Unlike wholesaling, the deals come back month over month, and it's actually not that crazy. So let's talk about the risks of this funding style. Let's talk about the risks, because everybody wants to just be like, oh, everything's perfect. This is what we started off with, right? Everybody says, go buy rental properties and make a bunch of money. It's just not true. So what are the risks? First of all, the biggest risk is losing money. How can I think of that risk? Because I've done it. How did I do it? Number 1, bad contracts. Now, how do I mess that up? Well, first of all, I'm human, and when I was getting into this, I was still very much learning this stuff, and I'm more of a learn as you go kind of guy, which is a little bit tougher when you get into the money side of things, because you may be learning some tough lessons that way. But I had bad contracts because I was working with people who were using contracts from people who don't actually run this business every day, and they were just kind of putting contracts out there as like, yeah, that should work, and they hadn't actually went through any of the bad sides of things. Now, what I do now instead is I work with a large team of people that do transactional funding like this every day, every week, every month, full time. They can say, hey, here's the things that can go wrong. Let's work with our attorneys to create contracts that work. Once I fix that, that solved that risk. But you have to know how to use those contracts to even get in that place. And so that's number 1. And then the second thing, and this one is really just as important, is bad communication. Now, one of the biggest things with communication is knowing who to communicate with. When I was getting started, whoever borrowed the money from me, that would be the person I communicated with. What's going on? How's the deal? Is this looking good? Are we having any issues? Now, what was the problem with that? When you fund transactional funding, remember, rewind to earlier in the video, what did we talk about? The money is escrow protected. Escrow means a title company, and a title company is the one who facilitates a real estate transaction. So who has my money during this transaction? The title company has my money. So why am I talking to the borrower if the title company is the one that will make the decision on, can I get my money back? Is my money safe? Illogical in hindsight. When I was in it, for some reason, it made sense because they were the borrower, right? So not only did I have bad communication, I had improper communication with the wrong people at the wrong time instead of speaking with the people who were actually managing my money. Mistake number one, if you don't want to lose money doing this, you got to have contracts that work. You got to know who to talk to. And most simply, the easiest thing you can possibly do is work with somebody who has proof that they know what the heck they're doing. And then you don't have to worry about all of that stuff. That's the biggest thing I can say. Losing money is going to be the number one risk in anything money related. Always, 100% of the time. And that's the primary risk that you run. The cool thing is that it's so easy to mitigate that by just JVing with people. Like, that's pretty cool, right? The second risk that you run into with this is saturation, okay? Now, people come to me all the time and are like, isn't the funding market saturated? I see everybody talking about, oh, I'm going to fund your EMD. I'm going to fund your double close. Yes and no. The market is saturated with people who have no idea what they're doing. It's that simple. The risk you run with saturation is falling into that pool. If you're somebody that's like, I want to get into this, and you're going to be the laziest human on earth and just go post in some Facebook group with a bunch of other people making the same post, and you're like, I want to fund deals for people. That's not how this stuff works, okay? What beats saturation is two things. Number one, strategy. People will come to me and say, oh yeah, I reached out to people and nobody wanted it. Okay, cool. Glad that's what you think. I've got 20 deals coming in today and I'm too busy vetting them to have to deal with the fact that you're not trying. Sorry, but that's the reality. Strategy is what beats saturation every day of the week. If you don't want something to be saturated, you have to be better than everybody else. And in today's day and age, it's not very hard to be better than everybody because most people don't try very hard. And so if you have strategy, you can beat this saturation. The second thing is volume. You know how many people it took when I was getting started to build this business? How many people I had to speak with, and also the leverage on my time, right? Not only did I talk to thousands of people, get on tons of phone calls, many of which were a waste of time, but I also now use other people to help me grow this business, to increase that volume even more outside of what I'm capable of just in my own time, right? And so that's the risk that you're running there with saturation, is are you going to look at something and say, you know what? Too much supply, not enough demand, moving on. And if you do, well, as always, thank you, because it leaves more room for the rest of us. So that's two of the risks that you're running into with these deals. The other risks that you run into on these deals are really with the people themselves and the deals themselves. And this is something that people don't talk about enough. It's the risks of the deal structures themselves. So if somebody is buying something using a creative strategy, for example, if they're buying something with a creative strategy, the risk that would come to you is it being done properly? Because if it's not, you are you're a part of it, right? If you fund a deal for somebody, you become one of their partners in the deal. And that means that you could be implicated if somebody were to do something, make a mistake, do something wrong, right? That's why when you're funding deals like this, you shouldn't just be dishing money out willy-nilly, making those mistakes. Now, what somebody else does, are you responsible for that? No, not necessarily, but you supplying capital to people is the last piece of the puzzle that they need to get things done. And so that actually carries a decent bit of weight on these deals of like, is this a smart, wise decision to get this person into this, for me to get into this, and is this going to make sense for me? Now, overall, if I had to boil it down, all of the risk really at the beginning just falls on losing money. That's it. You're sending money. You don't want to lose it. You can mitigate that by JVing with people. And so if you're getting started, start there. Simplify things. And if you ever use your own capital, this is like, I know this sounded cliche when I was getting into investing, but I gotta say it. If you're ever using your own capital, you have to assume that it's gonna be lost. You have to. Every time. You have to assume that that money is gonna get lost, because if you can't lose the money and you're not working with somebody that knows what they're doing and you're going out on a limb, that's a risk that you're taking. You got to be aware of that. So that's the biggest risks and the biggest mistakes that I have made, was that communication stuff and just losing money in the first place. And thankfully everything has gone uphill since then. Doesn't mean that there's no risk, not by any means, but it was a good start. Now you tell me, even with the risks involved, what makes more sense? Is it the rentals, which are averaging negative money on every single rental property that we have right now? And by the way, this is not just me, this is everybody. Welcome to reality 2025. Is it rental properties, or is it funding where, hear me out, your worst possible month, you still don't lose money? And what? It's passive versus active over here. The reason why I do transactional funding is because it is infinitely scalable. It's percentage based. Let me show you, because this is like, if you understand this concept, it changes everything. So if you fund a $10,000 deal, and let's say you make 10%, okay? This is just for easy math. You fund a $10,000 deal, you profit $1,000. Cool. Well, you fund a $100,000 deal then, you profit $10,000. And if you fund a $1 million deal, then you profit $100,000. This is leverage. Funding deals is the same process every time, right? We went over it. You have the deal come in, you vet the deal, you sign the contracts, and then you get the capital for the deal. It's the same process every time. But I can fund a $10,000 deal and make $1,000, or $1 million deal and make 100 times more, $100,000 on that scale. And guess what? That person's going to come back next month and want to do another deal with you. Because they're going to go out, they're going to get on their cold calls, they're going to have their team go generate leads for whatever properties, and then they're going to come to you and say, hey, I need more funding. And then we fund another deal. That's why if you look on the progression, on the timeline of my journey, I've made more money every month, or maybe every 2 months, because it is cyclical, but every few months I make more than the previous months. And it's just because those months, those people came back, and then I went out and found more people every time. And that's what makes this strategy insane. It's not that there's no risk, it's that it's easy to get into if you know people already doing it, or if you just follow this track record, it's easy to get into. It's infinite upside with this leverage that just still blows my mind every day. I'm still sitting at my desk every day thinking, like, how do I just do bigger deals and make more money? I know people that do millions of dollars a month with this strategy. So the ceiling is infinite, and I'm just getting started with it. And that's why I chose transactional funding as my actual path. But here's the craziest part. I had to learn transactional funding from scratch because there wasn't a lot of people in the space to learn it from, and there still aren't. That's why I broke down my exact journey for how I built my transactional funding business starting from zero, and you can watch it right here for free.